I'm going to show how to make this eye effect using Affinity Photo's procedural texture filter. This effect consists of 4 different levels. The first 2 levels are for the iris, and I create this pattern like this. Then I have the eyeball as a separate level, and then the 4th level is this highlight that's over on the eye. I'm going to use polar coordinates for this effect. If you haven't seen my video on polar coordinates, I suggest you might want to review that first before you do this one. To get started, I'll start with a new document. I'll set it to 1024 by 1024 pixels and make sure it's in RGB 8 mode. I will choose black and fill it with black and choose the move tool and then add a live procedural texture filter. I'm going to start with a new equation, assign that to all 3 channels. I'll add a single custom input A, set that to 1, and I'll call that scale. I'll start with a regular coordinate system, VAR. V equals vec2 of Rx, comma Ry, times A divided by W. Next I'll add a 2-element vector for the polar coordinates, which is VAR, VP equals vec2 of A tangent 2 of v.y, comma v.x, divide by 360 degrees, and then the second element will be length of V. So it looks like that. I have my polar coordinate system set up now, and now I'm going to apply that to the cellnoise function. So I'm going to use cellnoise. Now cellnoise requires a separate input for the x and y components. So I'm going to use my polar coordinates this time though, vp.x and vp.y. And then there's a third element that sort of controls randomness of this. Just going to leave that at 1, and I think that'll be okay like that. So there's my cellnoise function. If I increase this, you can see it's slightly random, but it's very much like a spiral. So I don't want it to look quite like that. Well, the first thing I want to deal with is this line right here, because that's very annoying, very noticeable. To get rid of that line, I'm going to take the absolute value of vp.x, and it got rid of it. It created a mirror image on both sides of the x-axis, but it's not too noticeable, and I'm going to just go with that for this example. Next thing I want to do is add another real number input, and I'm going to call this one lines. And you'll see why in a second, but I'm going to increase this up to about 4. I'm going to multiply the absolute value of vp.x times b. As I bring this up, I'm getting more lines. They're showing up mostly in the middle here, and you can also see my sort of mirror image effect going on, but I won't worry about that right now. Now, as I zoom in here, you can see these lines are showing up more. The lines are emphasized more, and so if I add a bunch of these lines, those are going to be the iris. All right, so that's going to be the iris of my eye. Now I notice the lines are all pretty straight and uniform, and I want to mix that up a little bit, so I'm going to add a turbulence effect to this. And so I'm going to add that to each of the components, and I have to add it outside of the absolute value parentheses. So I'm just going to add it here, and the first one is multiply it by a scaling factor t. That'll control the amount of the turbulence, and then the turbulence is added with dir. I'll use the SC, the smooth version of that, and then I'm going to make it with just based on V, but I'll also multiply it by C to scale it like that. And let's see if I add a 0 to 1 slider for this and label that T for turbulence, and then add a real input for C and call that turbulence scale. So now I notice it's changed and it didn't work, and the reason it didn't work is because the dirsc, the directional noise component, is actually a vector component. So I've got to take the x and y components of that vector. So I'll just do a dot x on that. And there, now I have it, and as I can increase this, I'll add some squiggliness to my shapes. And if I increase this one, the frequency of the turbulence will be greater. So there's my turbulence. That looks great. Now I want to do the same thing to the y. I'm just going to copy this and paste it next to the y and change this to a y. So there's some turbulence for the y. I can turn this down just to add as much as I want. This will work better if I set it to a lower value. To create the pupil, I'm going to multiply this by a smooth step function. The smooth step function requires 4 edges. I'll use 0 to 1 range inputs for the 4 edges and label them edge 1 through 4. I'll multiply by smooth step of E1, comma, E2, comma, E3, comma, E4, comma, and then I'm going to use vp.y because that is the radius. And then I'll bring this one down, this one down, this one down, and this one down. Okay, so now if I bring up this edge 1, I can create a pupil on my eye. I'll leave this one all the way up and bring this up here. I'll bring this down to 3, I think. Now I want to be able to adjust the intensity of this cell noise pattern because it can be a little bit too much, and I need to have some controls for that. So I'm going to add a fader for I. I'll call that, label that I, and then label this fader. And I also want to put in an offset. I'll use the -1 to 1 range for the offset, give that the variable name OF, and label it offset. Now to apply this, I want to apply it to the cell noise, but I don't want to affect this smooth step portion. So I'll put parentheses around my cell noise. I'll do I times that. And then over here, I'll add a plus OF and close that off with the parentheses. Now, I should be able to adjust the intensity here and then add this. So then I can sort of control that, and that'll be real helpful when I'm trying to get just the look I want to get. Now it's starting to look pretty good, but I want to have one other factor that I can use to control the number of cells in here independently. So I have these lines and I can add more lines, but I want to be able to add some more cells. And to do that, I have to look at the cell noise function, multiply my vp.y times another variable. So I'm just going to add another real input, D. I'll set it up to about 2 for now, and then I'll multiply vp.y times D, like that. And that will give me, I won't use it too much here. For instance, I can set this up, but it can give me some special effects, especially if you're trying to do some sort of animal eye or alien eye. That would work really pretty well. I'll leave that like this for now, just set to 1. Okay, so I've got my first eye. I'm going to add an adjustment. I'm going to use a gradient map. I'll start with the default. I'm going to change this to black. I'll do this one first. I'll change that to a pretty light color, about there. And then this one, I think I'll make it just a little bit golden. That takes most of the color. And maybe a little bit, yeah, like that. Maybe desaturate that a little bit. Maybe make it just a bit darker, like that. I can also move this around. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'll leave it like that. Back to my layers. Now I'm going to drag this on top of the pixel layer, so I have these all grouped together as a single layer. Now I'm going to select that and Control-C, Control-V, make another copy of that. And this one, I'm going to change the type from normal to screen. I think that'll work well. Then I'm going to choose that. I've got my scale set to 4, lines 36. So now I'm going to decrease the scale 2.5. That's pretty good. And I'm just going to increase the number of lines. And on this one, I'm going to use this D, I'll call this cells, and I'll add a few more cells for this one so I can get some more variation. And I'm going to add a little more turbulence to that, like that. Maybe increase the frequency a little bit. I think it's going to be too much, so I'm going to decrease the fader on this and bring it up a little bit like that. Alright, now for this one I'm going to change the color. So for this one I'm going to go with sort of a green color, I think. And so I'll just move this over to a greenish color and maybe desaturate that a little bit. And now I think I'm going to, let's look at these edges a little. I'm going to just mix these down until they want it to be a little more gradual. And let's see what this one looks like. So I already have this all the way up, so I can't bring that over a little bit more. I think I'll make this 3.7, make that a little bigger, like that. And now I'm going to add, I'm just going to copy and paste this one again. And I'll bring it up here, and this will become my eyeball. So for this one, though, I'm going to add a new equation. I'm going to assign that to the alpha channel. I'm going to copy this equation and paste it down here. And then I'm going to take out this cell noise portion of this. So all I'll be left with is the smooth step. And I'm going to change this. Just going to make this white. And I'll make this slightly red. Good. And then I'm going to bring this up. And I'm going to adjust this color, so I want to have this one be pretty much white. And just a little bit of the red there at the top. Bring this down there so I can start to see it coming in now. See if I can adjust my edge a little bit on that one. Yes, I want it right at the edge there. Now I can't see the other part of the eyeball, but I could if I were to zoom out enough, but I'd have to zoom out all of these because they're not really synchronized. So that's one problem with doing it like this. I want to add some more turbulence and probably get some more lines in here. Have some more veins and increase the turbulence. And I'll get some sort of squiggly lines like that. Yeah. All right, last thing I want to do is to add a highlight to this. So I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to add a procedural texture to that layer. I'll start with a new equation, assign it to all 3 channels, add a single real input A, bring that up to 3. I will call this VAR, V equals vec2 Rx comma Ry times A divided by W. And so, let's see. Oh, I forgot to put anything in here, so I'm going to fill this with black for now. So there I can see my coordinates there. And then I'll put in a semicolon. To do this, I'll just do a smooth step, and I'll have two edges, E1 and E2. And the value is going to be length of V. So I've got to add my edges now. 0 to 1 sliders, E1, E2. I'll just label this scale. I'll label this edge 1, and I'll label this edge 2. Make this smaller. Okay, so that looks pretty good, except I really want the opposite of this. I want a little white dot, and the rest of it black. So I will take 1 minus smooth, like that. There, now I have my little white dot, and I'm going to use an overlay of this on, I'll try a screen. Okay, if I choose this, I can move it around, so I will move this right about there. So we have a nice little highlight. I could smooth that out a little bit, like that. You can make it a tighter spot if you like that. Okay, that's my eye effect. You can try to modify it to do some different effects. I was able to get a pretty good variety of different colors, and then I also did some look like either alien eyes or lizard eyes or cat eyes or bird eyes. Let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.